Number 10. The growing doll. Let's kick off this list with one that definitely terrifies me the most. If you think dolls are creepy, then just wait until I tell you about this one. In 1918, a man in Japan purchased a seemingly normal doll for his sister. Unfortunately, the sister passed away soon after, so the family created a shrine in her memory and placed the doll within it. As time passed, however, they noticed something incredibly unsettling about the doll. It was growing hair. That's right, the hair on the doll was getting longer and longer as more time passed. Because of this, they believed that the doll had become possessed with the restless spirit of the little girl. As a result, they entrusted it to the care of a temple where it still remains to this day, growing more hair. You are able to go to the temple and visit the doll, but photography is strictly prohibited. The priests at the temple say that the doll's hair has now grown down past its knees, and they say that her mouth is opening, slowly growing human teeth. Number 9. Inunaki Tunnel. Deep within the mountains of Fukuoka, Japan, you will find the Inunaki Tunnel, home to a dark and troubled history. In 1988, the remains of a young man were found within the tunnel, having been killed by a group of teenage boys. It has also historically been a training ground for Buddhist practitioners who say that the tunnel is a spiritual hotspot for lost souls. As a result, the tunnel has been sealed off with concrete blocks, but there is an opening at the top where anyone who's foolish enough can climb up and sneak inside. People who have gone inside have reported the feeling of being watched by a malicious energy, with reports of camera malfunctions, paranormal activity, and unidentifiable noises taking place within the tunnel. Some people say that they can hear the cries of the man who died within, his spirit potentially haunting the now abandoned place. Number 8. Buddha Statue. In 2014, an ancient golden Buddha statue was examined, and researchers discovered a horrifying secret hidden within. X-rays showed the body of a real monk that had been mummified within the statue, sitting in the exact same position. Researchers believe that the man had taken part in a process known as self-mummification. Centuries ago, this was a common practice for Buddhist monks across Asia. To avoid fat and moisture causing their bodies to decay after they died, they would eat little to nothing in the time leading up to the end of their lives, eating things like pine needles, tree bark, and sesame seeds. This process would last for years as they got older, and they would then ingest a poisonous sap to finally end their lives. Researchers believe that the man inside the statue was a Buddhist monk who died around the year 1100. What was most unsettling though was that the man's body was basically hollow, containing papers covered in messages instead of his organs. Number 7. Kappa remains. The kappa is a cryptid that is native to Japan. For anyone who doesn't know, a cryptid is described as an animal whose existence or survival to the present day is disputed or unsubstantiated. Some famous cryptids include Bigfoot, Mothman, and the Loch Ness Monster. A kappa is a water creature that is described as being green, having a scaly skin and webbed feet, long elastic arms, and looking humanoid. They are said to lure people to pools of water where they then drown them. If you're looking to avoid being drowned, then it is recommended to carve your name and birth date on a cucumber and feed it to a kappa, because then they'll apparently leave you alone forever. In May of 2014, the remains of an actual kappa were supposedly discovered and then put on display. They were apparently from a kappa that was killed all the way back in the year 1818. It doesn't seem to have been confirmed what the remains are, so could this be actual evidence of cryptids being real? Number 6. Goddess of Death. If you're a fan of cursed objects, then let me introduce you to this statue titled the Woman of Lem, also known as the Goddess of Death statue. It is crafted out of limestone around 3500 BC and was discovered in Cyprus in 1878. I know what you're thinking, isn't Cyprus a part of Europe and not Asia? Well, actually, while the country of Cyprus is culturally and politically a part of Europe, it is geographically in Asia and considered transcontinental. So it counts. And if you think it doesn't count, you can take it to the complaints department. Alright, back to why this statue is cursed. Every single family that it has belonged to over the generations has died. The first family to own it had 6 members, all of whom died within 7 years of coming into ownership. The second owner's family died after only 4 years. The third third family to own it also started passing away, but the 2 remaining members seemed to realize what was happening and donated it to the Royal Scottish Museum. Number 5. King Tut's trumpets. Let's take a look at some more cursed objects, this time from King Tut's tomb in Egypt. In 1922, a group of archaeologists entered King Tut's tomb and found many interesting objects, including a set of wooden, silver, and bronze trumpets. In 1939, BBC Radio recorded the sound of the trumpets so that people could hear the ancient instruments being played. A few months later, World War II began, and a legend started that the trumpets were capable of summoning wars. Egyptian trumpets have apparently often been used on the battlefield for alerting and directing soldiers, so the legend isn't completely unfounded. And there are Egyptian archaeologists that believe trumpets have mystical powers in relation to war. In 2011, an anonymous staff member had been photographing and documenting the trumpets and decided to play one of them. The Egyptian Revolution then taking place later that year. Number 4. Kala Bandar. Now let's travel to New Delhi, India for another apparent discovery of a real-life cryptid, this time one known as a Kala Bandar. In May of 2001, one of these creatures was apparently terrorizing New Delhi. They're described as being around 5 feet tall with thick black hair all over their body and glowing red eyes. It was also described as wearing a metal helmet and having metal claws. All over the city, reports started flooding in of attacks from the so-called Monkey Man, and citizens were terrified. A total of 3 people actually died as a result, from a woman falling down a staircase to 2 men who were cornered by the creature and fell from a building. Many reports came in of bites and scratches that had come from the creature, and people in the town were scared of even going outside, armed men guarding the neighborhoods at night. Eventually, sightings stopped coming in and the town was able to relax. Number 3. The Terracotta Army. In China in 1974, a group of farmers made one of the most significant archaeological discoveries ever. They were digging a well when they found what they thought was a statue of Buddha. In fact, it was the famous Terracotta Army. The army consists of over 8,000 foot soldiers, chariots, and horses, which were buried along the first Chinese emperor back in the year 210 BC. They were built to commemorate his massive empire. As it turns out, the Terracotta Army may be cursed, the farmers believing that any disruption to the army would bring misfortune. And as time went on, this seemed to be true. The farmers and land were taken over by the government, business officials, and third-party groups who wanted to take advantage of and profit off the army. The farmland was demolished and replaced with gift shops and attractions. The original farmers have passed away, except for 2 who now work in the same shops that took over their land, signing autographs for a mere $2 a day. Number 2. Lady Di. When we think of well-preserved specimens, we often think of creatures that were held in ice before being discovered thousands of years later, often still having hair, skin, and even blood in their veins. So now let me tell you about Lady Di, a human woman who was kept perfectly preserved inside an airtight tomb for 2,000 years. Researchers discovered the tomb of the woman in 1971, the wife of an important Han Dynasty administrator who passed away in 163 BC and received the burial of a royal. She was placed in a crypt with over 1,000 luxurious items like makeup and 162 statues who would be her servants in the afterlife. Thanks to the seal of the tomb, when she was found 2,000 years later, she was still in incredible condition. She had soft skin and hair and even eyebrows and eyelashes, and they were even able to find her last meal, which was melon, and the cause of her death, which had been a heart attack. Unfortunately, since she was discovered, her body has now started to decay, and only pictures can show what she used to look like. Number 1. The Hope Diamond. The Hope Diamond was first discovered in a mine in India, triangular in shape and being described as a beautiful violet color. It was then placed in a statue from which it was apparently later stolen, the thief suffering from an extremely unfortunate death. Since then, it has been said that the Hope Diamond is cursed, anyone who has owned it or even merely touched it having a similar fate. Some owners include Jacques Collet, who took his own life, Princess de Lamballe, who was killed in the French Revolution, and Jean Le Taverne, Bernier, who was killed by a pack of wild dogs. The diamond finally came into ownership of Harry Winston, who made the wise choice of donating it to the Smithsonian in 1958, where it remains to this day. There are many more tales of owners who were apparently cursed by the diamond, so feel free to look it up if you're interested. Since the diamond made its home in the Smithsonian, the curse has supposedly ended, and there have been no more reported victims of the jewel.
Number 10. Vita Radium Suppositories. Yeah. What I've discovered while making this list is that after radium was discovered, people became obsessed with it. Like the Gma and Frank's Red Hot commercials, they put that on everything. Vita Radium Suppositories were developed as a way of relieving our digestive systems a la radioactive material. According to this ad, these suppositories were guaranteed to contain radium, which is exactly the opposite of what we want to see on the back of canisters today. People believed that radium had miracle effects when it came to the human body, saying that they made you glow, because they did. These pills were to be inserted into the rectum so they could be dissolved and devoured by the entire body. According to the ad, and I quote, "Every tissue, every organ of the body is bombarded by its health-giving electric atoms." They also implied that it would increase libido. Oh wow. But the only thing that rose to the expectation was the death toll. Number 9. Radioactive Toy Set. Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab was the hottest thing to hit toy stores in the 1950s for a hefty price. The toy set cost was $50 because it was actually radioactive. $50 was a steep price to pay back then. Meanwhile, I can spend that in like a day living here. So fortunately, a lot of parents bought more affordable science sets that didn't have radioactive stuff. The toy, as a result, was discontinued, not because it was actually poisonous, but because no one could afford it. Some say it was safe for children to use as it was very carefully constructed, but put it in the hands of like a 9-year-old boy. Iffy. The Atomic Energy Lab contained a cloud chamber in which you could see alpha particles traveling at 12,000 miles a second. That would be pretty cool. Like if I was that kid and I didn't know what was going on, I totally would be like, "Mom, I want that for Christmas." I would have a blast. Pretty impressive, but definitely something rated for kids like 40 and up, with maybe a science degree and like a lab suit. Number 8. Perpetual Sunshine. And no, that's not my nickname, but if you want to call me that, go for it. Wouldn't it be cool if we all glowed like Alina in Shadow and Bone? Yeah, it definitely would. But like if someone offers you any kind of radioactive substance, like run, get out of here. Radithor was yet another cure-all remedy said to cure everything under the sun. The deadliest snake oil out there. But I should say, we do use radiation today for things like cancer, but we know more or less what we're doing with it now. Radithor was a patent medicine that featured distilled water and 2 isotopes of radium. Perpetual Sunshine in a bottle is what advertisers called it. And it was one of many radioactive elixirs on the market, but sadly, the more a star glows, the faster it burns out. A popular Radithor advocate in 1932 eventually developed holes in his bones, skull, and his entire jaw had to be removed. Still, the man sadly died due to radiation poisoning, so not the miracle cure people thought it was. Unless you didn't like him, that's dark. That's very dark. Okay. Number 7. Thoradia. From cancerous white face powder to radioactive cream, beauty really does kill. I wonder how much of my makeup on my face is slowly killing me. Joke, not a joke. I don't know. Thoradia was another deadly beauty product introduced by a Parisian beauty company that was all the rage. It boasted having thorium and radium lead to help stabilize and promote blood circulation, tone the facial tissues, eliminate fat, and remove wrinkles. Product toured Belgium, Italy, Portugal, Romania, Egypt, and of course, France. Radium's energy was useful as far as creating a natural luminous appearance, but in 1937 the French government put a massive restriction on the sale of products that contained thorium and radium, forcing them to stop using the ingredients. Like, it was almost as if the government was catching on to some not so dewy glow side effects. Beyond cosmetic, the cream was also recommended for scrapes, bruises, herpes, frostbite, you name it. Some clients might not have seen the effects of these chemicals right away, but their later ailments definitely had a relationship to the miracle cure makeup. Number 6. Radioactive shoe sizers. Why use a measuring tape or those like cool metal feet slidey things when you can just use a nuclear bomb? Okay, well, not a nuclear bomb, more like a whole bunch of radioactive materials. I'm honestly just as surprised as you are. I had no idea we were this obsessed with radium for this long. The shoe-fitting fluoroscope was a revolutionary new device that changed the way people have their feet measured, because apparently rulers didn't work. Despite scientists getting severely injured during the creation of the device, shoe stores adored it. Parents would take their growing little boys and girls to the counter to have their feet scientifically sized. They put their feet into the X-ray fluoroscope and the salesman and customer would see the bones in their foot. The customers also got a healthy dose of radiation. What a deal! Fortunately though, by the 1950s these machines were recognized as dangerous and slowly banned state by state until 1970s, though Europe continued to use them because they're chic. But decades before bans came into question, the dangers of radiation were already public. In the 1920s, X-ray pioneers suffered very gruesome and very public deaths. Actual data didn't appear until the 1940s and nobody listened until the aforementioned date. But hey, at least they knew they were a size 7.56 over a 7.5 shoe. That's helpful. Number 5. Radioactive toothpaste. Everyone wants to have a smile that lights up a room. Yeah. Radioactive toothpaste. A joy for dentists around the world. So we know by now that people freak out at radium for breakfast because they were convinced it could cure everything, even bad yellow teeth. A German company called Our Company wanted to get out of the steadily building war business, so they came out with thorium toothpaste in order to divert their supplies away from the Yahtzee, evil German people, nuclear initiatives, especially after they knew Germany was going to lose the war. Marketed as the scientific toothpaste, they advertised that the radioactive chemicals would be able to hinder the bacteria in the mouth, which I guess would be technically true, therefore creating healthier teeth. But unfortunately, the opposite was true. Like rotting away. It's awful. Number 4, the Trico system. Look, I hate waxing too. I hate it. I've tried it twice, and to this day I refuse to put myself through that kind of pain for a bikini pic. Look, I'm just not gonna do it. It's the worst. I get it, it's a struggle. The Trico system was eager to solve, and it did, kind of. The Trico system was a hair removal device that became a must-have in every hair salon in the 1920s. It would remove hair painlessly. All you had to do was sit at a mahogany desk and face a window. When the flip was switched, there was no burning, just a slight hum from the machine, and boom, no unwanted hairs. Except there were some horrendous side effects. Yes, it would remove the hair, but soon women and men would develop cancerous ulcers, carcinoma, and death. The reason? They were using X-ray technology, which is, as we know, radioactive. It would be administered to the skin for a few times and would require anywhere from 15 to 20 treatments to be effective. When the Trico machine was leased out, however, there was no mention of what the technology they used was, and the person administering it wasn't very well qualified either, right? Clients were just marveled that it worked so well until it slowly burned their face off. So bottom line, if someone says anything is a miracle cure, just maybe like scream at them and run. Number 3, the Radium Girls. This story breaks my heart. It's so sad. The Radium Girls became so radioactive that if you stand on their graves today with a Geiger counter, it will still jump like 80 years later. Small town girls from New Jersey were hired by a local factory to paint clock faces of luminous watches. How did they glow, you ask? Well, with glow-in-the-dark radioactive paint. They painted 250 dials on average daily, and in order to ensure that their lines were clean, they would lick the end before dipping it into the paint every few times. They were paid in pennies, around 27 cents per watch today. That's what it kind of breaks down to. So they worked tirelessly, each day swallowing more and more paint. Slowly but surely, the girls were eaten from the inside, their bones dissolving with each stroke of their brush. In the 1920s, 4,000 workers were hired by the US and Canada. The inventor of the glow-in-the-dark paint himself died of radioactive exposure. The first death of the girls, though, was Molly Maggia, died after suffering burning ulcers and agonizing aches, her jawbone dissolved, and so on. The USRC covered it up, saying they weren't responsible, until dozens more died via extreme tumors and horrific other illnesses resulting from the radium. Number 2, Marie Curie. Marie Curie was a brilliant scientist, a pioneer in many ways for women in the field. Her primary accomplishment was expanding our knowledge of radioactivity. But they didn't take any of the precautions we now know to take today. In fact, Marie and her husband Pierre were both buried in lead caskets to contain the radiation they accumulated in their bodies while alive. Even their furniture was was radioactive. Marie discovered 2 new elements, radium as I've mentioned, and polonium, and was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. Using the new discovery of radium, Curie discovered it could be used as the gamma ray source in X-ray technology, advancing the field. She also invented smaller, more portable X-rays that medics could use on the battlefields. However, the Curies overlooked what prolonged exposure to radiation could do. She even used to carry tubes of radium in her pockets. In the 1920s, it finally caught up to her. Her health started to deteriorate rapidly and developed a severe form of leukemia. She passed away on July 4th, 1934. Pierre died years earlier in 1906 from an accident in the street. He was run over by a horse-drawn cart. Because he was so young though, his body held on to more radioactive materials, so his body was actually more radioactive by the end than Marie's was, because by that point it would have run through. Interesting, but terrifying. And last but not least, you knew this was coming, the atom bomb. Hands up if you think every world leader should get rid of their nuclear devices. But they won't, sadly, which is a terrifying thought. After all, no one buys a weapon without having planned to use it. And if you look at the aftermath of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, well, one of us is going to be next. The bomb at Hiroshima destroyed 2/3 of the city's building in a flash of light and killed 60,000 by the end of 1945. Some were killed directly, others years later due to their injuries. Decades later, survivors of the bombings were still pulling debris from beneath their skin, like little shards of glass, as well as enduring horrific medical conditions like cancer, kidney diseases. The list goes on. 3 days after Hiroshima, they dropped another on Nagasaki. Today, the cities have found new life and would hardly be recognized after 75 years. However, the memories of what happened remain, and how could they forget? Hibakusha is the term used for survivors of both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and many, like Hiroshi Harada, take action for disarmament and advocate for world peace. Of course they didn't know what we know now, but it sure makes you wonder what we will wish we had known today. Definitely for sure.
Kicking off the list at number 10, let's dive in. Barracuda. Exploring the deep is dangerous if you're a diver, of course, not because of the deadly ocean life surrounding your every direction, but because if you come up too quickly, major health problems will follow. But if not that, probably a deadly barracuda, equally as scary. This deep discovery was made by user Arira95. I'm pulling real events for this one from real deep sea divers. We're going to the real content for this one, so buckle up. One time when my parents visited Mexico, they went diving and my mom was slightly lower than my dad looking at the ocean floor. My mom had on a gold necklace that was floating in the water around her, and it was a sunny day and a fairly shallow dive at this point, so it was sparkling. My mom looked below at all the critters when my dad grabbed her and started frantically shaking her arm to get her attention. I'm sweating reading this. She looked up and a barracuda was directly in front of her, staring intently at that shiny necklace. She slowly moved up her hand to cover the necklace, and they slowly and calmly moved away from it, and it took off without bothering them anymore. But still pretty unsettling, and taught my mom to be a little more aware of her surroundings when she's diving. I mean, fair, but I mean, no one expects a barracuda. Also, if your mom wants to dive with chains on, that's pretty sick. You won't catch her slacking. Even in the depths of the sea, she's like, I'm ready. I don't care who shows up. I don't care who I bump into. Water shoes and bling. Check and check. Let's go diving. Number 9, venomous sea snakes. Last year in the deep waters off Australia's coast, of course it's Australia, always Australia, a sea snake that was once thought to be extinct has been rediscovered. How fun. He's like, psych, you thought. Just when you thought the ocean couldn't get even more dangerous, now we got new sea snakes to worry about. The short-nosed sea snake hasn't been seen in 23 years, and they would often live near Ashmore Reef. But last year, divers found one 67 meters below the surface in the twilight zone, which is pretty wild. Just lurking in the dark, just hanging out, meditating. The Australian Institute of Marine Science is responsible for this discovery, and the team calls this a second chance to protect and further understand the species. And an up-close personal encounter is brought to life from this diver. Apparently, this happens from time to time before major storms. Snakes can sense an oncoming storm, so what they try and do is latch onto something heading in the direction towards shore, so they don't have to burn energy and they can just grab onto like a barrel or something and then just, make its way there. Pretty smart. So this diver was exploring, nothing was going crazy or anything like that, and then he felt a snake wrap onto his leg because he felt a storm was coming in. The diver didn't even know that a storm was coming. The snake did, and he wrapped its snake self around his leg. As soon as I was in the shallows, it uncurled and headed up the beach where it hid under a breadfruit tree. That was from a diver named Specialist Celery. Great name, also terrifying experience. I don't like snakes in water or on land. Next, number 8, surprise tiger shark. Yeah, not something you want to see diving in the deep, a tiger shark. A glowing shark, left shark, I don't care. I want none of the shark smoke. This deep sea discovery comes from user Stormcutter. Sick name, a little bit better of a diver name. They say, I know a guy who was out diving for crayfish and lobster by the ocean. Also, the I know a guy trick, it was totally you. Don't lie to us. Crayfish often hide under the rocks, so as he was diving, a tiger shark emerged from a cave and rammed him, breaking his arm and ribs. This guy got shucked by a shark. That's insane. He said the shark was testing him out. Yeah, I'd say. That's pretty sweet, man. I'm glad you survived, honestly. I bet you couldn't wait to tell people what happened. You're like, oh, my ribs? Yeah, I got sideswiped by a tiger shark. Yeah, he's feeling testy. You know how tiger sharks do. If you're wondering what that experience may have looked like, this is footage of a rare tiger shark in New Zealand, lurking in the deep. Number 7, Humpback Mama. This deep dive happened about a year ago. A diver named Sidetrack38, that's their username, not their legal name, although that would be pretty sweet. Sidetrack38 is like, what's up? They were exploring the ocean one afternoon when all of a sudden they got charged by a mother humpback whale. The divers shared their experience online, saying, her curious calf had swum around us and we were between her and the calf. 2 of us never even saw her coming. We were watching the baby, but our 3rd diver saw her come. She kicked down and swam under us last minute. We didn't see anything until that 60-foot freight train passed just underneath us. Whales are beautiful. They're beautiful but terrifying creatures, my friend. Glad you didn't get a broken rib or back in this case, because whales, they like to go pretty deep.
Just view.
Just trying to figure us out.
Incredible.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Justin, you want the overheads off?
Look at that view. I hope we're getting screen captures of this.
Number 6, Mako shark. Mako sharks are one of the fastest sharks in the world. I'll start by saying that. Just get that fact in your head. Given this list so far, I would also start sweating if I were you. This is a scary one. This deep dive horror story comes from username One Dumb Diver. Great name. They clearly made this account just to share this occasion, so let's dive in. Nowadays, we dive with shark shields, which emit electronic pulses that freak the sharks out and keep them away. But back then, what we used was essentially a chainmail sleeve. The idea being that sharks hate the taste of metal, so if you give it your arm, it'll bite down, decide you're gross, and then move along. So I wait, it comes over, and I make a perfect move to give it my arm. However, just before the crunch, it occurred to me that I had left my sleeve on my bed. Now I had a huge open, gashing wound on my arm from the bite in open water, and I trailed blood everywhere. Not an ideal scenario. So once the shock finally wore off, you realize that you're in salt water, and salt and open wounds, they don't feel good. In a panic, I dropped my weight belt and shot up to the surface without any sort of waiting period. Not great. Because I hadn't been paying attention to the currents, I was approximately a quarter mile downstream of my boat, which meant that I had to swim back up to it. After getting bitten by a shark, imagine having to swim, that is a nightmare scenario. Glad you're okay. Also, you're not a dumb diver, you're experiencing the things, you're figuring it out. You're doing great. You're brave. I don't even like going in lakes. Number 5, more sea snakes. Coming from Patrick667 about a year ago as well, they posted, so 3 days ago I went snorkeling off Mimba Island in Zanzibar. Everything went normal and we started heading back, so I grabbed my net and I put my black fins, my black mask, snorkel, and black wetsuit inside. Once back ashore, I grab my bag, jump off the boat, and head to the rental office to return said equipment. At that point, I feel my bag is moving somehow. At first look, it seemed like a flat black worm squirming quickly. After rotating the bag, I realized I was looking at only the tail of a 1 meter long black sea snake, one of the most venomous reptiles ever, trying to get out of the net. Like in the lobby. How it got there, I have no freaking clue. That is a nightmare scenario. Imagine being like, thanks so much, I had a great time. Here's a sand dollar. Also, don't mind the venomous snake. Number 4, the frilled shark. Back in 2004, marine biologists discovered this dinosaur, the frilled shark, just hanging out, just lurking about 870 meters below the surface. So if you're anywhere around there, watch out. This one looks like an eel almost. It's so scary looking, it's so slippery and quick. Frilled sharks can grow up to 7 feet long and they fight in the dark. They don't need to see to attack you, which is pretty terrifying considering all these deep dive stories are all in the pitch black. So unless you're a deep diver, you're not really gonna run into the frilled shark. Have you ever dealt with one of these? Are you a diver? Are you watching this because you're a diver? Please comment down below if you are. Comment some of your personal experiences. These were a nightmare to read. I couldn't even finish half of them. Everything is so dangerous and so fast underwater. Number 3, snapping shrimp. This little guy can literally create a sonic boom as it attacks you. That's how fast it is. You won't see him coming, and neither did this diver. Here's a clip of a mantis shrimp punching through a diver's gear. Yeah, right through their water shoes. Bam!
Ow, that really hurt.
They're so quick. Oh my God, they're tiny, but they really hit. They're often found in coral reefs, oyster reefs. These little guys, these pistol shrimp, they hit their prey at 100 kilometers per hour. And in doing so, a large air bubble is created, and because this, Mike Tyson shrimp is so quick with the left hook, the following pop is around 200 decibels. The sound alone can stun its prey, and if they're lucky, it sometimes kills them. That's how you want to go out. You don't want to go out with one of these Superman punches to the neck. Number 2, comb stars. Ocean life is by far the scariest thing out there. We have no idea what's in our oceans. We discover some crazy shit every year. Some deep sea fish with bioluminescence are for sure aliens, while others are just natural predators that look scary. Like the comb star, for example. This guy was not in Finding Nemo. He would have been a weird addition. A comb star is a starfish that contains tetrodotoxin, which is this deadly neurotoxin that can cause paralysis. Yeah, Finding Nemo, that movie would be over in 8 minutes if this guy was there. Per every gram of comb star flesh, there's enough toxin to take out 500 mice. So if you have a mice problem, honestly, you can call one guy. It's a very specific weird call, but I know how you can do it. A little bit of tetrodotoxin. Tetrodotoxin? Tetrodotoxin, that's what it's called. And finally, coming in at number 1, the electric eel. Awesome, that's the worst thing I've ever seen. Great. The moray eel, first of all, don't do what he just did. Don't go up to a random eel and start rubbing it like it's a genie lamp. That's not smart. It's not a Great Dane. You don't want to do that. That was the moray eel. That one can bite your fingers off in like 2 seconds. But you should never touch an eel in the first place because a lot of them are electric. Yeah, just like that MGMT song that's now stuck in our heads. As its name suggests, there's types of eels that can mess you up even if you were to get the first hit. Specifically, the newly discovered 2.5 meter Electrophorus volti. Appropriately named after Alessandro Volta, aka the guy who invented the battery, this eel can release a shock up to 860 volts, which is more than 7 times the voltage of a wall plug. A swimming wall plug that gets hungry. Nice. We love nature. I'm never swimming again.